We have spent considerable scientific energy over the past century documenting the biological effects of diet, physical inactivity, tobacco use, and environmental toxins on human health. The evidence base for each of these risk factors is extensive, causally coherent, and sufficiently established to have produced clinical guidelines, public health campaigns, and insurance-covered interventions. What we have been far slower to acknowledge, despite evidence that is now just as compelling, is that the quality of our social connections belongs in that same category. The epidemiological data on loneliness and health is difficult to dismiss. Meta-analyses of multiple large-scale longitudinal studies have consistently found that chronic loneliness and social isolation increase all-cause mortality risk by approximately 26%. A frequently cited comparison places this risk on par with smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Loneliness is not merely an unpleasant emotional state. It is a chronic physiological stressor that dysregulates cortisol secretion, impairs immune function, elevates inflammatory cytokines, and accelerates cognitive decline via mechanisms that are being mapped with increasing precision. The UK's appointment of a Minister for Loneliness in 2018 was widely reported as a curious policy innovation. In retrospect, it was an early acknowledgement of something epidemiologists had been documenting for years, that social disconnection was producing health costs substantial enough to warrant governmental attention. The U.S. Surgeon General's 2023 Advisory on Loneliness and the Epidemic of Disconnection brought this framing to a much larger audience. These are not soft cultural concerns. They are formal public health postures rooted in decades of evidence. The clinical challenge is translation. How do you prescribe a social life? The intervention models that exist, community prescribing programs, befriending services, social activity referrals, have produced promising but inconsistent results. Unlike blood pressure management, which benefits from a century of pharmacological and behavioral intervention research, loneliness treatment lacks standardized protocols with proven efficacy across diverse populations. That gap is not an argument against formalizing loneliness as a clinical risk factor. It is an argument for investing in the intervention research that would allow clinical protocols to be developed. There is also something worth examining in the structural drivers of the loneliness epidemic, because no amount of clinical intervention will adequately address a problem whose primary causes are architectural and social. Urban design that prioritizes automobile infrastructure over walkable community space, housing markets that price young adults out of stable social geographies, digital communication platforms engineered to maximize engagement while undermining genuine connection, these are not medical problems. They are political and economic choices, and treating loneliness as primarily a clinical issue risks individualizing what is fundamentally a societal failure. The formal recognition of loneliness as a clinical risk factor is overdue and should be welcomed. But it should arrive alongside an honest conversation about why loneliness has reached epidemic proportions in some of the wealthiest, most technologically connected societies in human history. The screening tool and the prescription are necessary. They are not sufficient.